Hey guys, welcome to my Samoan language instruction chapter 3 review. We're just going to get started. So the first thing I'm going to ask you is if you know the difference between perfective and imperfective verbs. Okay, so hopefully you don't get these confused with the transitive and intransitive verbs that we talked about in chapter 2. And the difference between them is perfective verbs is something that I can see the totality of the verb. They're complete. You can see the action being started, you can see the middle of the action, and the action being completed. That's probably the main thing that you need to know is the action has been completed or will be completed, okay? And then imperfective verbs are incomplete. You're engaged in the action itself. You haven't completed it or you're not going to be completed at that specific time that you're referring to. So let's just look at some examples here. So let's do perfective verbs. And if I said something like, I washed the car, you've seen this sentence before, or hopefully you have, and I washed the car. So the first thing that we need to do is identify the verb, and that's wash. And then in this sentence, you can see that I've completed the action of washing the car, okay? So that's the thing that you need to remember about perfective verbs. If I switch the sentence up just a little bit, okay, so if I switch it to, and this is going to be our imperfective example. If I said I was washing the car, okay, so now, again, I have my wash as the verb, but in this case, at this specific time that I'm referring to, I have not completed the action of washing. I'm engaged in the action. And so if you need to think of imperfective verbs as that, where you haven't completed the action at the time being referred to, then remember it that way, okay? So hopefully you can remember that. And the reason why we need to know the difference between imperfective and perfective verbs is because it changes my sentence structure up just a little bit, or it changes the way that I say my verbs in Samoan. So if you remember imperfective verbs, okay, my imperfective, and got it. So imperfective verbs, again, they don't show the action in its totality. They show engagement, okay? You're performing the action, you're not done with the action. So imperfective verbs are kind of my normal ways of saying my verbs. So in most cases when you see a verb, you're going to see it, and if I saw a verb in the Samoan dictionary, it's going to be in the imperfective form, okay? Going to be in this form. But if I want to switch the verb and make it more of a perfective version of that same verb, then I add on certain suffixes. So I would have the suffix. There's 3 different types. You can have the 2 normal, the a or the a at the end. You can have the ina at the end, and then a kind of it depends on the word kind of case. So these are the 2 that you should know for sure. And then when you come across other kinds of verbs that have a funny ending at it, you're probably going to be running into the perfective form of that, and then you can start using it into your Samoan usage, okay? So there's that. So let's move on to when do I use the perfective form? That's a question. When do I use the perfective form? So you can use it the same way you use it in English when you want to show the totality of action. But there are some common patterns that you'll see implemented with the, not going to get that all in, so we'll do patterns here, okay? Regarding the perfective form. And those common patterns are, I need the room, so I'm going to switch it. The 1 are negative statements, okay? So negative statements, and I'm not going to write that all out. But the reason why is if you said something like, YouTube will not read this book, like at all. You're not going to start it, you're not going to finish it. You can see the totality of that action in that kind of statement, okay? Another way is if you just don't want to have an action started or completed at all. But then there's these stative verbs that we talked about with like health and different things like that. Other ones would be emotions, thoughts, relationships, things like that. So you don't use, or you do use the perfective form a lot with stative verbs. And then also with verbs of motion, okay? So verbs of motion, okay? So you'll see the perfective form in these cases, but not as often. And so it actually changes the meaning of it. So if I said, wa alu le tusi, you're saying go the books. And so that kind of doesn't make sense in English or Samoan, but if I switched it just a little bit to the perfective form, wa alumia le tusi, the perfective form shows the totality of the action go, and this kind of implies the books are really going, like they're selling quickly. And so there's going to be things like that that you need to remember, and if you can't remember, then you need to go back to that video when to use the perfective form. There's others, and if you're having a hard time with the perfective form, then again, go back to that video. The next thing that we need to ask you are about descriptive pronouns. Do you know all 11 of them? Okay, so can you, in your head right now, pause the video and state all of the descriptive pronouns? Okay, the next thing that I want to ask is, do you know the descriptive pronouns emphatic equivalents? So pause the video and tell me off the top of your head. This one's an easy one. So what is this is the emphatic form. What is the descriptive form of this same pronoun? Okay, so the only difference is you take away the I, so it'd be mato. Okay, so then what if I asked you, what is the descriptive form of olua? Well, hopefully you know that that's just lua, and that's also the number 2. And what if I said ma? Okay, so this is the descriptive form. What is the emphatic form of this same pronoun? And the emphatic form would be I, ma, ua. Okay, so hopefully you can get those and the other ones as well. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to go over is, what is the descriptive sentence structure? Not the entire one, but the shortened version that I kind of told you to help you remember. Okay, so that instead of being tense mark or action doer, it's doer action. So whenever I use descriptive pronouns, it switches it up to that. That's just the way that it's easy to remember at first, and then it can help you complete sentences in the beginning stages of learning. Okay, so then the next thing you need to know is, and I'm not going to ask you, but just remember that transitive verbs, so we're talking about transitive verbs. This is something from chapter 2. Usually tend to take the perfective suffix, okay? So that's something that it will require a little bit of knowing on your part what the difference between transitive verbs and perfective verbs are. But remember that transitive verbs are something that needs an object. And so in Samoan, when something needs an object, it tends to take the perfective form. Not always, but it tends to take the perfective form. So you'll see something like a sentence like, we'll do this one. So sa, o, fa'a, aongaina, le peni. Okay, so we'll do that. And normally, this, if I took that ina off, sao fao nga, I guess I should probably put a macron on there. Sao fao nga le peni, that is technically not correct. You would be able to be understandable at that point. And I don't want you to get this to be too worried about it, but the more and more you're speaking Samoan and the better you want to be, start to say sentences like this. The reason why you take the perfective form in this transitive verb is because, okay, and the reason why it's transitive is I have a verb here and my object is the pen, okay? So it's a transitive verb, and transitive verbs usually take the perfective form, and the reason why that is you can see in this sentence, you can see the totality of using that pen. So I used the pen. I've finished using, I've completed the action of using that pen. So that's the reason why that tends to do that, okay? So let's move on to, so let's say if I have, well, what's the actual descriptive sentence structure? So it's pretty similar, so I'm just going to say it's the tense marker, and then it's a descriptive pronoun, okay? Descriptive pronoun. Then it's my predicate phrase, Then normally it'll be an object, okay? My object will come next. Not always, so this is optional. And then also another optional thing is my prepositional phrase, okay? So hopefully you remember that. That's what the descriptive sentence structure actually is. The next thing I need to ask you is what tense marker gets replaced with te? So I have a new tense marker for descriptive pronouns and descriptive sentence structure. And this tense marker is te. Which tense marker does te replace? And that would be a. So I don't use a in my descriptive sentence structure. Okay? Awesome. So, and then the next thing is, what is my sentence structure with te? So hopefully you can get that. So with te, it's my descriptive pronoun that goes first, then te, then it's just like it was normally. So then I do predicate phrase, and then I would do my object, and then I would do my prepositional phrase, okay? So that is how I do a sentence structure with te. Okay, so let's move on. The next thing I want to talk to you about is predication. So this predicate phrase that I've been writing in the sentence structure, when I say pred p or predicate phrase, what is that? Well, a lot of times you can replace it with just a verb, and that's why I've told you in the shortened version, I would tell you tense marker doer action, or in the emphatic form it'd be tense marker action doer. Or if you wanted to switch it up, you could say tense marker subject verb, either one. But what a predicate phrase really is it's my action, it's my verb, and adverbs. Okay, so I started to tell you, start to think of predicate phrases as this: verbs and adverbs. And then what I told you is later on that you can also put nouns, adverbs. We kind of talked about that. Adjectives, and prepositional phrases. I can put all of those in my predicate phrase in Samoan. I can't do that in English, but in Samoan, I can put these elements. I could put, if there's a lack of a verb, then I could put a noun in the predicate phrase slot, or an adverb, or an adjective, or a prepositional phrase. If there's a lack of a verb, then I can put those elements in my predicate phrase spot. So let's give you a couple examples. Ua mai lana ava. Okay. So his wife was sick. Mai is not a verb. Sick is not a verb. If sick is something that's describing what? The state of this man's wife, okay? And so anything that's describing a noun, okay, or the state of a noun is an adjective, okay? So I'm using an adjective in my prepositional SWOT. You can see that my sentence structure is tense marker, okay? And just to be clear, this isn't a descriptive sentence structure. This is an emphatic sentence structure. And I can use this for both cases, but the reason why I have to use an emphatic sentence structure is because I have lana ava acting as my noun, or my doer, which is a noun, okay? So tense marker, and then I have my predicate phrase, and my predicate phrase is usually verbs and adverbs, but in this case it's an adjective, okay? So hopefully that makes sense. There is other ways that you can do it. If this isn't making sense, I'm sorry, I can only do so much in a review video. You need to go back to that. Okay, so negative verbal statements. We had a whole video on negative verbals. So the way that I'm not going to ask you, but just for clarity, normally the way I negate something is I do a lay right before a verb. So if I wanted to say not going, then I would say lay alu or lay o, okay? But then there's other ways that we taught you in this video. If I did something like olo'u lay alu, that's all fine and dandy. You could get by with this statement, but the way that they contract that in Samoa is e le'u alu. And then this is also kind of confusing because le'o normally goes before nouns when I'm using the negative, presentative, or negative and equative sentence structure. But if I'm using this kind of a sentence, o lo'u lei, if I have lo'u and then lei come right after, they contract that to a le'o, okay? So just remember that. And then another thing that you need to remember is what le'i is. Le'i is what? In most cases, le'i means not yet, okay? And if you need a little bit of brush up on that, I encourage you to go to that video as well. The last thing that I'm going to mention is auxiliary verbs. Do you remember how to correctly use auxiliary verbs, okay? So this is one of those hard videos. It's going to require a little bit of memorization on your part, and I'm sorry, I hate memorizing things. But the general pattern of this is tense marker, the auxiliary verb itself, that was a terrible plus, the auxiliary verb, then an ona, then my predicate phrase, and then so on, okay? So just remember that I have auxiliary verbs, and the normal way, there are other ways to do it, but the general structure is tense marker, auxiliary verb, then the ona to separate the auxiliary verb with the predicate phrase. So just remember these things, and I hope that this video has helped and been beneficial to you. See you next video. Tofa soifua.